Hi guys, so the podcast you're about to listen to is going to be the first proper one in our new series. We've already put out the intro one, so have a little listen to that if you haven't already. But this is the first of the proper podcasts. We recorded this one just after Christmas. We recorded it in January 2024, and it wasn't the first one that we'd recorded. We did a few others before doing this one, but on listening back, we quite liked it, so we thought we'd put it out first. So this one is all about Capa and age. So how age influences how we think about this behaviour. We spoke about loads of stuff in this one. And as you probably see with these conversations, they kind of dip in and out of quite a few different areas, and they kind of intersect a little bit. But in this one in particular, we're talking about peak age. So peak age in terms of this behaviour and how we define that. We spoke about the importance of early intervention. We spoke about the fact that sometimes, this happens slowly. It starts early and develops over time. Sometimes it happens later, around adolescence perhaps. And the reasons for that, potentially, the natural sort of developments that will happen there. Obviously, sometimes that's that tipping over from normal adolescent behaviour or normal toddler behaviour into something different. We spoke about expectations around different ages, what we might expect of a child at different ages, and we spoke about chronological age as well. The fact that a child's chronological age might not always match up with other developmental ages. I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome back to the Capa podcast with me. My name's Matt. I'm joined by Helen Bonnick and Jane Griffiths. Hi guys, how you doing today?
Hi there. I'm good, thank you.
Hi,
Happy
Matt.
New Year.
Hi, Helen. Yeah, good to see everybody. It's our first one back after Christmas.
It is. So this is being recorded in, are we in the second week of January?
We are, I think.
Is that right? It all feels a long, long time ago already to me, Christmas and New Year's. Today we're going to be talking about age and how that influences the way we think about this behaviour and influences, seeing Capa in general. So, this is a common question, but what do you guys feel about there being a peak age to see this kind of behaviour? Is there a peak age?
Do you know what? I'm going to jump in and I'm going to straight away say that I think when you start talking about age, you've got to consider the two aspects. One is there an objective reality that we can somehow understand? But then also the way that we've framed things because of how we get data and how we meet with people.
What do you mean by objective reality?
Well, is there actually an objective peak age, or is there ages that things start, or that somehow we could discover if we asked the right questions and looked and had enough data and spoke to enough people? I think, and possibly the answer to that, I think the answer to that is probably yes, but also I'm very conscious that the way we present the issue is also to do with the way we capture data and what our understanding has been.
Right.
So certainly when I started being involved in this work, people were very much talking about this wasn't a problem just of adolescents, because that was what was being reported, that was what was being looked at.
Is that just because of the way that the behaviour is viewed? You'll call it a tantrum for a younger child.
I guess so.
And look at it as kind of normal. But
I guess so, but it also wasn't being reported. People weren't researching it. It wasn't being reported. The research was within the framework often of youth justice and youth work, and so that was what people knew about. But having said that, what people were saying at that time was the peak age was mid-teens, and even now with all the other understanding that we've got and all the other data that we've got, I suspect that would still come out as the peak age.
I just want to Can I just pick up on something that Matt just said there? Because I think that's really important as well, is the fact that how we possibly as society and maybe as parents phrase it and recognise the behaviour. Because I think, like you say, how a 6-year-old behaves and how a 16-year-old behave, I suspect are labelled very differently and thought of very differently.
Yeah.
I do hear what you're saying, Helen, about collecting data, and I think hopefully collecting the right data, but understanding what we're talking about has to come before we can collect the right data. But you've got a parent or, a school where there's, 5 or 6 and 7-year-olds behaving in a way that is, I don't know, could be seen like we need to talk to the parents about their behaviour, and a parent is identifying with a teacher that they're struggling at home with the child's behaviour. When the child is 6 or 7, it's a very different conversation than if the child is 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do. I just wanted to kind of pick up on that of what Matt said, that early sort of recognising goes back to what is it we're talking about? What are the behaviours that we're seeing that we want parents to come to us earlier?
Mm. And if we're talking about the peak, are we talking about the peak level of danger, or are we talking about the peak occurrence?
Yeah.
Or what are we talking about?
Just kind of talking anecdotally, Jane, is there a kind of age group that you work with most in terms of you're seeing it coming up most of the time in, like we say, early adolescence or late adolescence or even, primary school age children? Is there an age that you see this issue coming up most with?
I would say that more families are coming to us identifying it with a primary age child.
Yeah,
but
that's what I see.
We do see more
well.
family. Yeah, so families are recognising it and seeking support. But a lot of families come to us with teenagers and young adults up until the age of 25, where actually they could say that this has been going on for such a long time. It's been going on for years, but now is the time. Potentially now is the time I've reached my peak and I cannot do this anymore.
Do you think that's because of the way it's being reported and people, a higher kind of awareness of like, do you know what, this is what's happening to me? Being able to put a name to it, linking back to our earlier episode about, what we call this behaviour and how it's being reported.
I think that certainly has to be a factor in terms of the number of referrals, that more people are understanding what we're talking about. More people see what's going on in their family and hear that there's other families that this is happening to, and think, okay, so here's someone that can offer me help that I've heard about and I didn't know about it before, so now I'll go and get help. I think that's happening more because of better coverage, more media, more presenting the services more widely, whether that's online or however.
Yeah, because so often, again, I'm going to kind of come at this from an anecdotal sort of point of view, thinking about my own experience working with families. But so often when I'm working with parents, and they'll say, well, I saw that something was different about, that they're, say they've had 3 kids, they could see that with the child that they're kind of talking about, something was different about them from very early on. And I guess it's kind of saying, recognizing that sometimes it is when a parent will come forward and report this or seek help for it. Maybe that's when we're kind of saying, it's, recording it is, that's the age of the child at that point. But like you're saying, it could have been starting much earlier. It's just that's when they're coming to,
and that would certainly be the narrative, if you like, in the literature, that parents will have been struggling for a long time before they come forward for help, and that they will be coming forward for help because it's got unmanageable. So that might be because the child is now of a size that they can't physically manoeuvre them in the same way, perhaps, or that they feel more threatening, or other things have gone on in the family, perhaps to make that change.
That's another question where it's like, is it just that it becomes unmanageable when the children are bigger, where actually the parents or the family are coping with the situation better when the child is more, easy to contain in a way?
I feel really reluctant to say yes to that. I think I probably do agree, But that feels somehow that denies the reality of what's going on for those families, where that child may be a real risk to themselves and to other people in the household, but somehow because of their age, people perhaps feel that ashamed to ask for help, or perhaps they still do feel that they can manage because of the child's size. I think it's a very complicated situation, isn't it? We have to be careful not to deny the reality of what's going on for younger children.
I agree with that completely, but I think there's a sense from parents that when their child is 5 or 6, there's hope that they can explain it away easier and they can manage it easier. So I wouldn't say that there was a denial, but I would say that there was a hope that we can manage this by ourselves. And it's only when the child gets older and maybe stronger and physically changes that maybe that becomes less of the reality for families. But I think you're right. What the danger is that does is saying that actually a 6 or 7-year-old is not struggling and needs the support. And I think we don't want families not to come forward because their children are of primary age. And we're saying, well, you should be able to manage that, because that's not what we're saying.
Do you know what I see quite a lot now as well, when I'm looking over referral forms, is a lot of the time that the trigger to get the family to reach out and ask for help is that they start thinking into the future.
Yes.
And they start going, all right, well, this is happening now, and they're only getting stronger and bigger, and what's going to happen as they are a few years down the line. And often it's that kind of, just looking ahead and thinking about what the future is going to hold. That spurs parents on to ask for help. And a really important thing that I would say just on that, and it's just because I think it is important to say, is that this is not always linear. It doesn't always mean that a child presents this behaviour at one point, that it means that it's just going to increase and increase as they get bigger and stronger, and as they get older, that the behaviour continues on the same trajectory. So I think it's just important to say that for anyone listening, because often I think there is that fear that there's an idea that these things kind of almost travel in a straight line. And it's, well, if this is happening now, then what's going to happen in the future. It's just always important to say that it doesn't necessarily follow that path.
I think, but it's also to pick up on the fact that, we want families to come and seek support as early as they can, because what we don't want is there to be a distressed child, a child who is trying to say, listen, that there's a problem here and I don't know how to communicate that to you. We don't want a parent to sit on that and think, I can manage this. It's about not feeling that shame and stigma. Absolutely. And getting support.
I suppose the other thing I'm thinking as we're talking about this is, and it kind of links in with the podcast we did thinking about education and schools, is that often at primary age, families are managing what's going on, that they're aware that there's an issue, but they've got support at school, which is helping them with managing behaviour at school and potentially at home as well. But that transfer to secondary school is often a point at which parents report that things have started to get much worse because their child has lost perhaps the one-to-one support, but it's a new environment, and there's
a much more intense
bigger environment, a more intense
well.
environment. Whole new set of expectations on a child about independence, getting to and from school, friendship groups, plus puberty kicking in. So a whole raft of things happening around the same age, which can potentially make the situation much worse, or for some families can be the trigger that starts everything off.
Another one of the questions we've got is what are the issues at adolescents that make it more of an issue? And I guess, touching on it, the changes in school, that's one thing.
I think as part of the job of an adolescent is to become more independent, isn't it? And to try to find out the kind of person that they are, sort of separate from their family and their parents.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that pushing against maybe the family sort of dynamics that are already there. So we see teenagers and adolescents as kind of pushing the boundaries and pushing those limits rather than boundaries, pushing the limits and testing the waters and putting their toes in the water and taking risks on purpose and trying to sort of monitor that alongside behavior that maybe is ramped up to a level that isn't just testing out those boundaries. And for a lot of parents, that gets a bit skewed at this age. And one of the things I just wanted to kind of make sure that we talk about while we're talking about age is, as an organisation, we have very mindfully decided to work with young people up until the age of 25. And we chose that because the adolescent brain stops developing at 25. But I think what we sort of talk to parents about with older children, we know that, just because your child may be 35 or 45, suddenly that parent-child relationship doesn't necessarily change. But actually, what we're saying as an organisation, I think, is that, there's a different set of responsibilities we would suggest of a child that is older and the choices that they're choosing to make. So if you're 7, 17 or 24, there's a different responsibility that we will work with parents and expect from that young person. And I think I want to sort of make sure that in age that we cover that, because I think it's really important because, understanding where the behavior is coming from and how we manage it is crucial in all the work we do, but particularly when we think about the ages of children. Like I say, you've got a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old. We are going to perceive them differently.
Different
and
expectations. And we need
absolutely.
to also throw in there, I think, as well, for some children, it's not going to be the chronological age that we need to look at, but maybe developmental age, which may be different in different aspects of their life. So
absolutely.
Emotionally or learning or whatever, maybe.
I see that as quite a big issue, because a lot of times though we do go, well, she's 16. She should know better. Or she, it seems like, I think she knows what she's doing. She's 16, but she's just choosing not to, behave in the right way or something. Ignoring that actually there might be the part of this young person or child's brain that is regulating their emotion may be undeveloped. They might not have developed those skills that you would expect them to develop earlier on. And there are often reasons why. I think it's looking at, like you say, not just looking at the chronological age.
And developmental trauma. What experiences has that young person or child experienced? What's happened within families and within families' context? And it's working with parents to understand that actually they're in a child's environment. We're not suggesting that a child who has experienced developmental trauma, for example, or maybe has been in an environment where there's domestic violence and abuse, that's to blame for their behaviour. But what we're saying is, let's unpick what's happening for the child in all its entirety, because often we'll find the answers to change in the behaviour if we can understand why it was happening. Yeah,
because all of those things, they're not a reason why the behaviour will happen, but they're going to have a bearing on how that child is coping overall.
Yeah.
And you've got to have a holistic approach to look at the kind of the broader picture.
And how developmentally are they managing that? Whether they're 8 or 18, how do they manage that behaviour? So I think age it can be helpful and it can be dishelpful in some ways, because we certainly have different expectations of children as they grow into adults and young people, for sure. I still think we have a responsibility to understand why it's happening and to not suddenly go down a different route as soon as a child turns 16 or 18 and go into the criminalisation world. I think for me, it's still understanding what is going on behind the behaviour and working with what we see in front of us and getting support from organisations who we feel will best support families alongside ourselves.
I want to pick up on that as well, Jane, there, because we're sort of talking as if it's something that just kind of starts very early on and then gets worse and worse and worse for some families. But of course, and for some families, as you've expressed, perhaps where there's very early trauma or something's happened very early on in the young person's life, or perhaps there's a diagnosis that's come with them. But for some young people, it will be a particular incident that's happened later in life that will trigger something, whether that is an experience within the family or outside of the family, in fact. But it can be that something traumatic has happened later on, and a young person then is unable to express what's going on in a way that is safe for everybody, and so starts to express their anxiety and their fear and their uncertainty through their behaviour in that sense, whether that's perhaps that they've experienced exploitation, whether they've been in an abusive relationship, whether there's some a mental health problem within the family. It could be anything. It could be so many different things. But this can be something that is something that starts later on, let alone peaks later on.
Yeah, you're right. I think we've kind of been talking as if it's sort of something, like you say, that started younger and developed, but certainly we have families that come to us and parents that come to us that have noticed that something happened at 13 or 14 and the behaviour changed, or 15, 16 and the behaviour changed, and are coming to us, within maybe even a year or two of that behaviour change. And again, it's how we work with families on that individual and looking at the circumstances between each family that comes to seek support.
And yeah, back again to the looking at very much at the individual circumstances that to do with what's behind that behaviour, and also very individually at what point it will feel worse or feel unmanageable or be recognised as an issue will be so individual, won't it?
And feel hurtful for you as a parent. Yeah. I mean, suddenly your 15-year-old wakes up and is, isolating themselves, won't come out of their bedroom, doesn't want to have a conversation with you, and that's seemingly coming out of nowhere. And as a parent, how you manage that relationship, and a year, fast forward a year and things are still no better, and we want to make sure that parents feel that they can seek support regardless of where they are in this behaviour, and even just chatting about it in the first instance and enabling parents to feel able to say, something has shifted in my relationship with my child, or something has shifted for my child, and it'd be good to discuss and talk about this, which is why I think raising awareness around the issue is really important. It's so parents can feel that they can have immediate conversations, because not all children are going to be able to talk to them about it. That's even if they know what's going on.
Yeah.
Something, it's not just an event that happens that's very clear and very significant. It could be something that's happened a little bit over time for the child, and suddenly a couple of things have happened.
I think you were talking earlier on as well, Jane, about the job of the adolescent almost to sort of distance themselves and find their own identity separate from their families. That's something that is a part of adolescence. Finding who you are separate from your kind of family unit, which isn't to say that we all turn our backs on our families but that is a part of the process of growing up, and that in itself requires it requires your mind to go in all sorts of different directions, make so many different decisions that you never had to before. That can be incredibly overwhelming for a lot of young people. Even just having that choice, that thinking, as they're testing those limits, going, well, what do I think about this? What am I going to do in this situation? Where those choices potentially before were almost unspoken, that you knew exactly what it was because it was dictated by the way that your family had always done this. So all of a sudden you've got so many choices to make, so many things to think about.
We're just bombarded with things at the moment, aren't we?
Bombarded, yeah.
I can't imagine being 12 and 13 and having so bombarded with information and expectations.
I mean, it's a long time ago, but I mean, I remember starting secondary school and just how the world just suddenly changes for you in some really exciting ways, but some really overwhelming ways as well. Things change a lot. So kind of adjusting to all of that is hard. And I always come back to like looking at where is the difficulty in the child's life finding that and making sure you're addressing that before anything else. And I think that, it might be a normal part of growing up, but some children and young people have, as we spoke about last time, or one of the other chats we had, they have more resilience for whatever reason. They are more able to cope with the changes and the pressures and the demands that are placed on them.
And I think just picking up on that. Sorry, Matt, jumping in there, but just something just came to my mind about often sometimes parents will say, "My other child, no, it seems to be okay," and I never experienced this from my other child. And I think it comes back to the fact that perspective is really important. How a one person perceives a situation against how another person can perceive it can be really, really different, even within the same family. And again, that comes, like you say, that can have something to do with resilience. It can say expectations of themselves. It can be gender related. You know
what? We started off today talking about expectation as well, and I think it comes back to that as well. When you were talking, then it just put me in mind of parents going, my middle child dealt with the same thing and we never had this issue. And there's an expectation that the next child growing up in the same family will sort of have the same experience of life and be able to deal with things in the same way. And it's just not the case, because no child has the exact same experience as another.
So how do we sum up age then when we're talking about this issue, and we're talking about a child using challenging, harmful, aggressive behaviours, how we're going to term it. When we decided, right, we're going to do a podcast on age. What have we come out of it at the other end? Is there a message we give? Is there an overall feeling that we would share?
I think to ask for help as soon as possible, not to think, if it doesn't feel right, ask for help, reach out. That's important, whatever age.
Helen, what would you say?
I absolutely agree with that.
Mm.
But also for us as practitioners to think about not minimizing the impact on a family with a younger child, because for that individual family, something may already feel or be unmanageable, unbearable. It's not just that it becomes unmanageable, unbearable as a child gets older, but it will be unique to each family in terms of the behaviour, the tolerance of that family, the resilience of that family, the circumstances of that family will all determine whether or not how easy it is to live with that and to keep everybody safe.